everybody, and welcome to what is something new for the Cloud Security Alliance here in West Michigan. We are going to be doing a series of technical videos, some thoughts and ideas and hints to be sure that you guys folks are all staying as secure as possible. My name is Matt Nelson. I am the president of the West Michigan Cloud Security Alliance, and also have with me is Lloyd Guyot from the CSA as well. Lloyd, what is your official title with the CSA?
Right now, I am a director. I think we're classifying it as director. So
director, I like it.
Yes, jack of all trades.
So we've been talking about some ideas of things to talk about. We know with everything that's going on right now with the COVID-19 situation, of course, people are scrambling to protect people, the new remote workforce, and one of the key parts of that is your VPN. And of course, VPNs are getting, maybe much more traffic than they have in the past, or maybe some new people that are using them. So we thought it made sense to spend a few minutes and just talk to you on some different ways to ensure that you are having your VPN as secure as possible. All right, so the first thing that we thought as we were putting this list together is that, really you need to level set, understand, what your current capacity is, how many users can you have, if there's any sort of hardware that's involved, understanding the specifications around that, and if there's any capacity issues. This is probably good information to just always have. Certainly from a future preparedness standpoint, I would say, definitely understanding, what you're capable of from a VPN standpoint, certainly critical in any sort of disaster recovery planning that you're doing in the future, because I think, Lloyd, feel free to chime in. I would imagine that most companies are definitely going to be adding pandemic to their disaster recovery plan if they haven't already.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to want to make sure that you can ramp this up and down. So while you're trying to scale up to accommodate the additional load on your VPN with all of your workforce remotely or possibly partially remotely, you may not need that capacity after an event. So keep in mind as you're establishing all of this infrastructure to do this, that you're planning appropriately and thinking about your business use cases and your capacity.
And I think that flows right into number 2 perfectly. Understand your licensing model that you currently have as well. Work with your vendor to understand if there's ways of doing maybe some temporary addition of licenses, but also understanding how to provision and deprovision those licenses. Maybe people only need them for a week or 2 because they're having to work from home right now, but we'll be back on site. We'll make sure that to deprovision all of those licenses so that you're not incurring costs moving forward as well. That also kind of leads into number 3 here as well. There's beyond just the user accounts, there's also all of the machines, computers and desktops. I know in our conversation that we had last week, a lot of organizations were struggling they either didn't have enough laptops to provide all the new remote workforce with a laptop, or some of them didn't even have desktops. Some were sending desktops home. Some were actually relying on people's own personal computers. So you really need to understand how adding VPN or to those machines and all of that works, especially if it's someone else's computer that they're using, just to be sure that when people are connecting to your network that they're safe, or that you're safe from them. And then certainly documentation is always key and critical. Make sure that some of your users have maybe never used a VPN before, maybe have never worked remotely before. So make sure that your end user documentation is certainly up to date and accessible to all the people that are using it.
Yeah, I'd say that's especially true. If it's new to your organization, even having a if you have a very small footprint today, or you just don't have a VPN footprint, you're going to need that documentation for your help desk. People are going to call. If you're shipping them desktops home, things aren't going to work. So you're going to need to have a really solid understanding on all of those aspects with provisioning and your documentation to be able to resolve their problems quickly.
And sometimes correctly done documentation can alleviate some of those calls coming into the help desk, who are probably getting overwhelmed with other calls right now as well. So next one jumps into some pretty technical stuff, but certainly ensure that you've got properly installed certificates, some easy word for me to say, cryptography associated with those certificates. And then as we were doing some research for this, certainly understanding that both MD5 and SHA1 is very old standards or old technology that certainly should not be used anymore, as it's very insecure.
Yeah, and I would say avoid for the actual VPN protocol, PPTP. That one's pretty much deprecated at this point. Look to LT or L2TP, IPsec, or OpenVPN, or one of those. I mean, there's several different ones out there you could use, but yeah, keep in mind that you're using something that's not easily breakable for your business.
Yep. All right, some more stuff here that we think is super important. Make sure that you are restricting your traffic over your VPN. Right? Know what traffic needs to be secure, and maybe some that doesn't. This way, you're not flooding your network connections and causing either slowdowns or outages, especially to your critical systems. So if there's anything that's not essential, don't let that go over your VPN. Look at some other options. Lloyd, I know you can speak to like the split tunneling and other things a little bit more than I can, and we've got some other stuff coming up about that as well.
Yeah, definitely. As we get into the metering and the browser proxies, people during the workday probably do things that you may or may not want them to. People streaming Spotify, they decide that they're going to run YouTube videos all day. All of that kind of traffic's really going to slow down your infrastructure and your bandwidth. So maybe you're a business where you absolutely need to keep everything over the VPN. I think that with the times that we're faced with now, with the changing that we're seeing, it might not make sense anymore to do a full tunnel VPN, and you need to consider split tunnel. And I think that leads into point 6, Matt, where we talk about, monitoring your usage. If you don't have a good baseline today for what your typical usage is, you're just probably going to have to run some monitoring and figure it out as you go. If you have a typical idea of what your current usage is, I think that'll help. But I think at this point I think we're about a month into the quarantine kind of situation now, roughly. You might have a good idea, but yeah, definitely be keeping an eye on that.
And you can also speak with your WAN providers too, and see if they've got some options of maybe adding on some temporary circuits or getting something higher bandwidth. Or perhaps if people are already working remotely, maybe you if there is important work to be done, you spread some of that out and ask people to work in different shifts if you don't have any other options, just to make sure that you're not, again, crushing any of your important systems with the VPN. Number 7 is an interesting one. There is some ways of having your internet browser actually proxy through the VPN, right, to point some traffic to the VPN, and then other browser traffic not through the VPN, I guess. So Lloyd, I know we had talked through this one quite a bit as well.
Yeah, it goes back to kind of split tunneling again, and then just looking at how you're managing your proxies today. You may have different proxy configurations you want to apply. Just kind of take a look at what's going to make sense to route through your VPN solution, and if you can implement that through your browser using a proxy or not.
Yeah, so maybe what Facebook doesn't need to go through the
Right.
VPN, but your ERP system certainly should, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Um, uh, DNS security, again, another way to do some of this as well. It can certainly, DNS can look for queries to understand where this traffic is going. Properly implemented DNS can also block a lot of malicious domains and sites that are out there. Um, so just make sure, I guess what we're saying here is utilize some of the things that are in, in place, or things that don't cost money, right? Like doing some internet proxying, or implementing DNS security. Keep adding more and more layers on to your VPN security.
Yeah, it's really important to, I guess, depending on your organization, for if you've got DNS leaks or IP address leaks, if your VPN's not configured properly, or even if it is, sometimes it can expose internal IP address ranges or DNS queries you may not want to go externally or to have out there on the internet. So you got to keep that in mind too as you're looking at doing this, that you've got the right switches on to protect that as best as possible.
Yeah, great point. Yeah. That's why I needed to have you on this video.
I'm glad to join today, Matt.
uh, so here again is really, I guess we have 10 steps, and we added an 11th one now that I'm looking at it, but 11 steps. It's an 11-step program. But here again, let's talk a little bit about, full tunneling versus split tunneling. If bandwidth is truly not an issue, then maybe you are able to run everything through the VPN. Obviously, the secure connection is better across the board, but maybe that's not an option. You've gone from having a small remote workforce to a vast remote workforce almost overnight, and there's just no way to full tunnel all of that information through your VPN. So at that point, certainly looking at split tunneling and dividing up some of that traffic going across the VPN would most definitely be the right way to go.
And I think too that if you've got, you may want to use a full tunneling solution, and that's been your organization's default, is there will never be split VPN tunnels. But as your workforce goes remote, you may find yourself in situations where you're forced to pick a split tunnel because maybe you have use cases where a user has to print at home and mail out forms. Well, you're not going to be able to do that necessarily over a full tunnel VPN, and that's going to kind of force you to re-engineer. So think about that too. I think we mentioned it earlier in one of the steps. I don't remember exactly which one. When you're taking a look at your use cases and all that kind of stuff, make sure that you're accommodating for that, so you don't have to quick do a fire drill later to go, oh shoot, now we have to go to a split tunnel. So it's something to keep in mind.
Yep. Yeah, and then so the 11th one that we added as a bonus, I guess, was, as we were talking through some of these things, and talking about risk and vulnerabilities, certainly knowing how your vulnerability management system operates, knowing how your patching cycles are occurring is a huge part of this. So the last thing that you'd want to have is, a bunch of people working remotely, some of them, again, working on critical systems that maybe they didn't work on remotely before. And then you don't understand what your patch management system or your vulnerability system is doing, and you send out a bunch of huge patches over the VPN and break everything. One, it's bad for business. Two, it also will cause people who maybe haven't done this type of work before to start losing faith that things are secure and stable, right? And the last thing that you'd want to have right now is people that are just learning the ropes of working remotely having a bad end user experience because, maybe we've not done something correctly.
Yeah, definitely. And it holds true too. Not that you should stop any vulnerability scanning, but if you suddenly have a large number of users on VPN and you have a routine scan that you're doing, maybe it's not the right time, or maybe you have to consider alternative ways you want to accomplish that scan for your devices. And I think that speaks to like when you're enrolling your endpoints and using the capabilities to ensure that the endpoint is compliant with your policies. Rely on those endpoint tools maybe a little bit more than you're used to, just because the circumstances with quickly building up a larger scale VPN might not accommodate, like Matt said, patching, scanning, that kinds of things that you would normally do.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is just, we can always go back to that basic hygiene of knowing your network, knowing what's on it, knowing what's happening on it, understanding your endpoints, knowing what is protecting your endpoints and that's up to date, understanding your patching process. It's again, it's all of that basic hygiene of security that sometimes I think gets lost in the shuffle of our very busy days, that, not just from a VPN standpoint, but just in general terms right now, can continue to ensure that your organization is a lot more secure.
Yeah, yeah, and since we have the bonus number 11, I think it's a good add here too that since you have more users, most likely remotely and on your VPN, it may make a good opportunity to do that kind of asset or network inventory in your systems, because there's probably going to be a lot less utilization. Obviously, your on-prem network is not going to be as congested. So there may be some opportunities to do some things that you're just behind on or haven't gotten to or intend to get to later this year that would be good to look at now.
Yep. So just to recap again, this is a very important part of your infrastructure right now, and going through and ensuring that you have all of these different security steps in place, or at least reviewing them, is certainly critical. Um, as we wrap up here, this is something that we want to start doing more of. So if you have any thoughts or feedback, please comment on our brand new YouTube channel. If you have any ideas for something that you'd like us to do some research on, if there's a topic that you are very, thorough on and you would like to be a part of one of these, let us know that as well. We'd be more than happy to have our community, very, very smart community, be a part of this and share your information with the rest of us. As I always say, we are stronger and more secure together than we are apart. If you're not a member of the West Michigan Cloud Security Alliance and you would like to join, just find us on LinkedIn. There's a group. We approve you added to that group, and you're a part of the CSA. We make that very easy as well. Lloyd, with that, any last comments on your end?
Nope. Very happy to do this today. Looking forward to the future ones. And yes, please give us thoughts, feedback, give us topics, join us. We'd absolutely love to have you.
Most definitely. Thanks, everyone.